The desert stretched for miles in every direction, a wasteland littered with the twisted wreckage of alien ships and broken monuments. They called it the Graveyard of the Lost, a cursed place where the remains of interstellar wars lay forgotten under twin suns. Most humans stayed far away. Only scavengers dared to step into its eerie silence. Jack Whitmore wasn't a scavenger by trade. He was a wanderer, a man looking for something he couldn't name after losing everything on Earth. His boots crunched on the glassy sand as he climbed a broken ridge, his eyes scanning the rusting skeletons of ships jutting out like the bones of ancient beasts. His breath caught when he saw it, a silver archway still gleaming against the decay. He adjusted his backpack and made his way toward it. It was under the arch that he found her. At first, he thought she was a statue, motionless, slumped against the pillar of a broken ship, long white hair fanned out behind her. But then her eyes, a piercing, luminous violet, flickered open and locked onto his. Jack froze. She wasn't human. Her skin was a soft, translucent blue, glowing faintly under the twin suns. Her body was twisted unnaturally, legs crumpled beneath her, arms weakly resting in her lap. Around her neck hung a small pendant, cracked down the middle. "Help! Me!" she whispered, her voice dry, barely audible. Jack dropped to one knee beside her. "You're alive," he said, stunned. "Hold on, I'll get you water." He pulled his canteen from his belt and gently tipped it to her lips. She drank greedily, trembling with effort. When she finished, she sagged back against the wreckage, tears leaking from the corners of her alien eyes. "Left me," she choked out. "My family." Jack swallowed hard, the pain in her voice cutting deep. He looked around. No signs of others, only dust and death. "Why would they leave you here?" he asked quietly. She shook her head weakly. "Broken burden." Jack clenched his fists. Whoever they were, they had abandoned her like garbage. Rage flared in his chest, but he pushed it down. Anger wouldn't help her. "Can you move?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, spine damaged, legs gone." Jack's heart twisted. She couldn't walk, could barely lift her arms. But something inside him snapped into place, a piece he hadn't realized was missing. He wasn't going to leave her here. "My name's Jack," he said, "and I'm not leaving you." Her name, she told him after a moment's struggle, was Sira. The first challenge was building a stretcher. Jack scavenged broken metal beams and fraying cables from the wreckage. Every few minutes he glanced back at Sira, afraid she might vanish or die if he looked away too long. "Talk to me, Sira," he said, weaving the cables into a makeshift sling. "Keep yourself awake." Through short, broken sentences, she told him bits and pieces of her story. Her people had crashed here while fleeing a war. Supplies were low. The injured were the liability. Her family had decided to ease the burden. Jack's hands tightened on the frame he was building. Monsters, he thought. How could they leave someone like her behind? Hours later, the stretcher was ready. He lifted Sira carefully onto it, apologizing every time she winced in pain. She was so light, frighteningly so. He pulled the stretcher across the sand, sweat soaking his shirt under the brutal suns. Days blurred together. Jack rationed water between them, foraged for edible roots and insects around the crash sites, and shielded Sira with makeshift tents made from torn ship sails. At night, when the graveyard turned freezing cold, he huddled close to her, wrapping her in every scrap of fabric he could find. Sometimes Sira spoke of her home world, a place of silver forests and endless blue oceans. Her voice carried a soft, mournful melody, even when her words faltered. Other times she cried silently, ashamed of her weakness. "You're not weak," Jack would say fiercely. "You survived when they gave up. That makes you stronger than any of them." Sira would only shake her head, her eyes haunted. One night, a sandstorm hit. Jack barely managed to drag the stretcher into the hollow of a broken ship before the winds roared to life. Sand hammered the wreckage like bullets. Jack wrapped himself around Sira, shielding her frail body with his own. Hours passed in the darkness. At some point, Jack realized he was singing an old earth lullaby his mother used to hum. His voice cracked and faltered, but he kept singing until the storm raged itself to sleep. When the sun rose, the graveyard looked different. Freshly exposed were pieces of tech, emergency beacons, and old communication devices. Hope sparked in Jack's chest. It took 2 more grueling days to repair a beacon. Jack spliced wires, soldered panels with heat from scavenged batteries, and prayed to gods he didn't believe in. Meanwhile, Sira's strength continued to fade. Her skin, once softly glowing, now looked almost gray. Finally, with trembling hands, Jack flipped the switch. The beacon pulsed to life, sending a weak but steady signal into the sky. They waited. Hours passed, then a day, then 2. Jack's hope dimmed. He sat by Sira's side one night, holding her hand carefully between his own. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried." Sira smiled weakly. "You gave me more than they ever did," she said. "You gave me a reason to believe." Jack pressed his forehead against her hand, fighting back tears. He didn't want her to die here, not like this, not alone. And then a roar in the sky. Jack shot to his feet. A ship, small but intact, was descending toward the beacon. The ship belonged to human prospectors, rough men and women who had come to the graveyard looking for salvage. They stared at Sira with wide, wary eyes. "She ain't human," their leader said. "No," Jack agreed. "She's better." They argued. She was a risk, a burden. Resources were scarce. Jack stood between them and Sira, fists clenched. "I'll trade my entire share of the graveyard salvage," he said. "Just get her to safety." The leader hesitated. Then, seeing the fire in Jack's eyes, he shrugged. "Fine. She comes with us." They helped lift Sira onto the ship's medical bed, hooking her up to IVs and monitors. As the ship lifted off, Jack watched the graveyard shrink away beneath them. Weeks later, Sira lay in a sterile med-bay, her body slowly healing under advanced human technology. It would take months, maybe years, before she could walk again, if she ever did. Jack visited every day, reading to her, telling her stories of Earth and all the places he wanted to show her. One evening, as the sun set outside the med-bay windows, Sira turned to him, her violet eyes shining. "Jack," she said softly, "you found me when I was nothing but broken pieces. You made me whole again." Jack smiled, brushing a strand of her hair from her forehead. "You were never broken, Sira. You just needed someone to remind you." And as the stars blinked to life in the sky above, Jack realized something he hadn't dared hope for in a long time. He wasn't lost anymore. He had found home. Weeks passed. Sira's recovery was slow, painfully slow. Her body had been starved for too long, her muscles atrophied beyond anything the doctors had seen. Yet every day Jack saw a flicker of determination in her, a spark that refused to die. He started bringing her out to the observation deck in a specially designed hover chair. The deck overlooked a quiet alien ocean on the outskirts of the human settlement. Here, under soft orange skies, Sira could breathe fresh air again. One evening, as a cool breeze stirred her long hair, Sira whispered, "Jack, when I'm stronger, will you show me Earth?" Jack chuckled softly. "I was starting to think you'd never ask." Her smile, fragile, radiant, made his heart ache in the best way, but not everything was easy. Some humans looked at her with suspicion, fear. Whispers followed them through the medical center corridors. "Alien parasite," some muttered. "She doesn't belong." Jack ignored them. He shielded Sira as best as he could, but he knew they would need a new home, a place where she wasn't seen as a burden or a threat. One night, after another tense day, Jack found Sira gazing out the window, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said brokenly. "I bring you trouble." Jack knelt before her, taking her cold hand in his. "Listen to me, Sira. You are not trouble. You are hope." She looked at him, doubt warring in her beautiful eyes. "We'll find a place where you're not just tolerated," Jack said. "Where you're wanted, where you're loved." Sira's hand tightened weakly around his. For the first time in weeks, Jack saw true hope in her eyes. 3 months later, they left the settlement. Jack traded everything he owned, equipment, rights to the salvage fields, even his own ship, to book passage on a long-haul transport heading for the outer colonies, where laws were looser and diversity wasn't feared, but celebrated. They traveled across 100 star systems, sleeping in cramped quarters, scraping by on ration packs. Jack took odd jobs to pay for Sira's medical treatments, repairing hulls, flying dangerous supply runs, anything that kept her healing. Sira, for her part, grew stronger. By the time they reached New Horizon, a small, lush colony world, Sira could sit up on her own. She could move one arm fully and the other almost halfway. She laughed more now, and when she smiled, it wasn't tinged with sadness anymore. It was pure. They settled in a small house overlooking emerald fields with a view of the twin moons that lit the night sky. Jack built a ramp for Sira, carved a garden where she could grow earth flowers alongside the strange crystal blossoms of her homeworld. Together, they rebuilt a life from the wreckage of the past. One night, years later, Jack stood outside under the twin moons, tending the garden. He heard the soft hum of the hover chair behind him, but when he turned around, he froze. Sira wasn't sitting in the chair. She was standing, shaking, unsteady, but standing. Tears blurred Jack's vision as he stumbled toward her. "I promised," she said, breathless, a tear-streaked smile on her face. "I promised I'd walk again, so I could dance with you under the stars." Jack caught her as she wobbled, pulling her into his arms. "I never cared if you walked," he said, voice breaking. "You were perfect just the way you were." Sira laughed, a beautiful musical sound, and pressed her forehead to his. "But I wanted to," she whispered. Together they swayed under the twin moons, slow, clumsy, perfect. There, in the gentle embrace of a man who had once been lost himself, Sira was no longer the abandoned girl from the graveyard. She was loved. She was home. And for the first time in her life, she was free.